My favorite film of all time would have to be Kung Fu Panda. For I have loved the film ever since I was wee 4 years old, rabbit living in the Bongo Hills. Yes, I am a rabbit, and that changes already the scientific view about then. I'm afraid I cannot be friend, not like I want to be your friend anyway, but I mean the way you chew. Ew, chew the stew. Anyways, my love for Kung Fu Panda is so much that I've already actually started getting myself into involving the martial law arts. I joined the local dojo Walnut Pass. While I was certainly not very good at it, but I made a very good attempt. I was also met with my best friend and a part-time lover at dojo. He was a huge fan of the mole-rat hybrid thing named Gordon and Tuba Snout. Tuba Snout suffers from a lot of allergies due to poor immune system, but that day except for having an amazing singing voice. I saw him singing Take On Me on an old dancing hall, Oyster Bay, a few months ago, and he had all the boards going nuts. Now, I was said earlier, I'm not very good at martial laws. In fact, not very good all in fact. I am terrible at it. Sometimes my instructor Dave the Hedgehog, no reaction relation to Sonic the Hedgehog, refuses to teach me. You're a psycho, Dave would always cry up as I rolled up Tuba Snout up in a nice blanket. I guess you could call him a mole in a blanket, huh? Now, because of the recent change in the stock market, we had to force some of our martial law lessons in incredibly smelly town hall, which is so smelly not even the local junkyard dogs came to visit. For any smell that is better for evil smell, I supposed. The horrible smell was due to the fact that the town hall was located right next to a sewage plant. The owner of the town hall, Don Futchie, was not very happy about us having lessons there. He wanted us out, and Futchie had paid a visit to Barrington Gwen Claude, who was more than happy to help Futchie with taking the asses to prison. I should mention that due to the rancid smell, there are some very little attends to the session. Actually, the only people who attended was me, Tuba Snout. Due to the hedgehog does make me a little profit, he needs money to give to the mayor. He acts like a local deb collector for Walnut Pass, and claims to having the money to the big boss. The big boss said to me that the most powerful gang was the East Coast, even though they weren't really on the East Coast. What the hell? With the big boss backing up, Futchie felt just a little particularly untouchable. One day, Don Futchie had a private meeting with Dave the Hedgehog and his office at Oakton City. He issued Dave to have a to ultimate form, and he had to make at least $700 by the end of Saturday night, or else he would take all of his martial art lessons elsewhere. I'll let you continue the lessons if you wet my beak. I'm not having any much of this, my dear, so just wet my beak, Futchie explained while pulling out an incredibly wicked face. Dave had to hide his utter disdain for the man who is worth so much that he could be classed as a sheep, but that could be a big scandal with your help. After returning to the Walnut Pass, Dave called me in and broke the news. There is just no way in the world we could make 700 before Saturday. That's only 3 days away, Dave cried and responded with, Do not fear, my Dave the Hedgehog. I have a plan. What is it? Dave asked before he could get an answer. I already hung up the phone. I then informed Tuba Snout, who was staying over in my place because it was the recession, that we needed it to be at the town hall exactly 10 minutes. But it's 4 o'clock in the morning, Bernie, Tuba Snout whined as he automatically hated nasy voice. I slapped Tuba Snout across the face at least almost 600 times before we made our way to the seemingly deserted streets. Arriving at town hall, I was let in by Dave the Hedgehog, what's the plan, big deal? Ideal, Dave asked as I made some cups of tea and some scones. I must be a rabbit in town who doesn't make the scones. I assumed that so many people ruined their lives because of them. Well, why not we host a movie night? I suggested. What do you mean by that? Dave asked. I then proceeded to explain perhaps we could host a movie night in the town hall and charge every single guest with a small fee of $100 per apiece. That way we would only need 7 people to come to the screen in order to pay Mr. Fanshui. So, by the way, at the time, Fanshui got himself killed by the local butcher and got revenge by turning the butcher into a breadcrumb. Sorry about that. I just got a little distracted by Tuba Snout's nose, as rabbits do tend to know, right, buddy? So when we could have a big movie night, and what should the movie be? Dave asked. Oh, how about The Wind in the Tuba Room? Tuba Snout suggested, and I respond with, I have an idea. Over the next 2 days, Tuba Snout and I went around down the hall to come to watch the movie. However, once the people learned about the incredibly $100 fee, they immediately declined the offer. Come Saturday morning, only the people who were set to attend the Sever Tesco by Marty Malone. His friends called him Monk. Haha. After getting the invites up, I headed back to his house on the outskirts of Walnut Pass, and then looked around the shelves for a perfect movie. That's when I saw it. It was Kung Fu Panda. It didn't look right. The cover of it had cuts and bruises, and it looked like a banana was smushed at the back. It was so sticky that the entire shelf fell to the floor. Thankfully, I was able to pry the DVD off with the spatula and made my way outside with Tuba Snout. Tuba Snout made his way back with that town hall. Tuba Snout was carrying some blankets and snacks, including a bag of electronics accessories, so we could all do it what it is, right, buddy? During the trek back, Tuba Snout kept complaining. Oh, I hate the cold, he sneezed as he mighty sneezed as I tried to get him to focus on his toe. At the town hall, we found that neither that Dave the Hedgehog or others had arrived yet, so we spent the time getting ready things set up. We packed a punch bowl on the table and laced it with laxatives because we were quite crazy mischief makers we are. 1 hour later, Dave finally arrived and accompanied Malone and Tesco. He was so accompanied by the man who could not recognize. He had a huge blurry man whose name was Spudgun. Why was he named Spudgun? Well, trust me, you don't want to know. What's the postman's knob? Pudgeman then asked me if I'd been drinking a glass of honey. What? Tuba Snout asked. So we got some snacks and then sat down on the blankets while Malone set up the DVD. My friends call me Monk said to the DVD player. That's because he was quite sad, strange little man. He was a pity. Thankfully, the DVD featured no commercials and immediately started off with the opening scene, which had Poe explain the story about the Dragon Warrior. However, Poe looked 100% and 1% fatter than normal, which made me vomit all over the floor. An eye for an eye, Tesco remarked, while dancing to the beat of the jungle with Tuba Snout. Back to the film. Monkey then showed up in the scene and said, we should hang out. Agreed, Poe said, as the screen cut to the Furious 5 and Poe at the local arcade playing Shrek 2 on the Xbox. However, that's when the dream sequence came to a smelly end, when Poe said, oh. After the dream ended, Poe woke up in his bedroom and fell off his bed, which caused him to fall through the floor and landed in the middle of the restaurant. For whatever reason, Mr. Ping didn't seem to notice this, and he proceeded to greet his son as normal. Poe then explained to his adoptive father that he had a crazy dream about the previous night. Oh, about what? Mr. Ping asked, as he pulled up a wicked face. My local bishop, Poe admitted, which Mr. Ping slammed his meat cleaver down to the chopping board. Local bishop? Mr. Ping asked as Poe responded with, But suddenly the screen cut to the Valley of Peace, where loud screams could be heard playing in the background. The film then showed Shifu meeting up with Master Oogway. Oh crap, Oogway said. His fat ass was ended up falling off the walking stick as he was sat on top of the stick in order to suppress his local station master. That's so amazing, Oogway. So Oogway proceeded to explain that not only the Tai Lung was returning to the Valley of the Peace, no, it was none other than Rapping Dog known as the Raster Pasta. Raster Pasta was an old friend of Shifu, for the pair had been monitored under Oogway together. Sadly, the years passed, and Shifu's position grew stronger to his dearest mutt friend, who became jealous. Mega jealous. And that's when the day finally came that Oogway had decided that if Shifu and Raster were worthy to be the mighty scroll, you know there is something you should all do, and I'm gonna tell you. But don't sweat it and forget it and enjoy the show. Raster Pasta rapped as he pulled out a large radio and began rapping to discuss Shifu and Oogway to freeze in time. Noodle, don't noodle, Oogway muttered for some odd reason that Raster had lost his chance at getting the scroll. It was an accident. He drove Oogway away instantly, but that was just really sad. Well, that's what I think anyway. Back at Mr. Ping's noodle shop, Poe then realized that the poster was an event with the Furious 5 and decided that he would attend. Suddenly a black screen showed up with the white text on it. The text said, Because Poe had a dispute with how much weight he had gained for this role, he could remainder of the film no longer be played himself. And that's when he instantly played unstudiedly named Mr. Panda. Mr. Panda was a teacher at Hartley Dales High School and was looking for his big beak. Sadly, he was a pain in the panda, so he wasn't quite made of it yet. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I doubt he ever will. Today is not today, Mr. Panda said, as he made his way up to the local churchyards, and that's when the Furious Five were performing some bizarre reason session. At the churchyards, Mr. Panda was actually able to get the event before anyone else did. However, he didn't find the actions that the Furious Five find interesting, not even the slightest. Instead, opted to shove a rocket up his ass. The rocket caused Poe to fly up in the sky, but however, a flock of blue jays came by and tried their best to sing to Poe the panda about the early life in the jungle, but however, he didn't listen, and he instead fell towards the sky, and then ended up crashing on top of Shifu. However, Oogway was still picked Mr. Panda as a dragon warrior, so things went semi-normal. Mr. Panda then was escorted to the Hall of Warriors, where the moon pool was hosted by the mighty dragon scroll. So right when you get the trampoline or something, Mr. Panda asked Shifu, as he responded with, "Actually, yes." Shifu then handed a Crane and Tigress and bring the huge trampoline, and each of them took turns jumping in front of it in order to reach the scroll. "Oh, come on, you guys, it's not that hard," Mr. Panda proclaimed as he leaped on the trampoline with his belly, and yet he wasn't able to grab the dragon scroll. He ended up falling from some more. He fell all the way down through the floorboards of the basement, where he was forced to help two men who were the close best of friends. But what was the worst of beans? So sad, Mr. Panda and the old man busted out dancing some weird 1970s jazz music. Shifu, meanwhile, could see them and pulled out a horrified face. During that evening, Mr. Panda struggled to find his living arrangements and ended up accidentally walking into Crane's room. Crane, meanwhile, was busy painting his fields of gold. Crane was actually planning on selling the paintings to Grand Duke, who would grant Crane about $800,000 grant, which will ensure lives of Crane's future stock up in the greenhouse. However, Panda only ended up busting through the door in Crane's bedroom, which startled him and caused him to ruin the painting. However, Crane did not seem to mind. Instead, he pulled an incredibly weird face as he was weird to Tesco, turned to me and said, "It's perfect for us, Pete. They got a box chain." I guess the film was turning to Tesco insane, but that was not hard to see, was it? Anyways, Crane then told Mr. Panda to F off and never return, but Mr. Panda didn't understand and asked, "Why not drunk, you plunk?" "Okay," Crane proclaimed as he and Panda began to make out. It was quite a sight to see. However, during this exchange, Tuba Snout turned away and reminded him of Luca Barsi and his general. Also, Barsi forced Tuba Snout to throw his onions into a furnace. So yeah, that must be some story. Some Luca. Meanwhile, Shifu's undercover lover and messenger Zing had headed towards the onion hut, which was where Raster Pasta was being held captive. As he was being held captive in a large brown box, a bottle of homemade otter sauce was placed on top of the box, as Raster's one of his true weakness. Now Zing was pretty dumb, and he ended up taking the bottle off the box, which allowed Raster to break free from his captivity. "Party time, everyone, because it's party time," Raster sang as he began dancing out of the onion hut and into the busy streets of China. Terrified Zing made his phone call to Special Detective Sam Bramsbury and requested her immediately assistance. Bramsbury arrived only a few moments after carrying a briefcase, which was very large and heavy. "Special Detective Sam Bramsby," Sam said to her friends, spread open to my enemies, Sam proclaimed while holding up his mighty finger to the air. That caused Zing to make such a quite smug face. Too smug, I might say. I may vom all over Tesco's head. Poor Salvatore Tesco. Just couldn't catch a beak. Eek, can he, buddy? Zing and Bramsby then headed back to Bramsy's car, and he began tailing the Raster Pasta. They ended up following him up to the gates of Graceland, and they watched him walk through. "What the hell do we do now?" Zing asked. "We followed him through the gates and reset him," Sam explained, which Zing asked, "What about dinner?" Sam then said to himself, piped up before saying, We shall follow him in 6 hours. And that's when the pair made their way towards a local cupcake shop where they sold hot meals, and it was pretty run by a fox who used to run flowers out from the French ward. That's when the film cut to the show, which weird commercials. One commercial did have a postman who was forced to deliver loads of really expensive items only the man by the locals, Master Chemby. This was due to the man's love of cherry coke. Now, what's Cherry really wanted? A glass of wine and a crust of bread? No crust of bread for those in need of cheese or for the mice. So I might be delivering a brand new tomorrow then? The postman asked, while the Master Cherry responded with, maybe they could audition the cards too. What was this sight again? The postman asked, and very loud that he caused Malone to throw his chair at the wall in complete anger. What the hell was that? Malone asked angrily as he began and beating the snout out of Dave the Hedgehog. The Spud Gun, meanwhile, did nothing to stop the violence. He was just drowning glasses of gravy. Yes, buddy, Spud Gun was quite of a weird man, but don't judge his mother for the proper Miss Potato. The next commercial had a big Chungus be proclaiming, "Welcome to Hunnex," and that's when he proceeded to give an incredibly 5-hour tour of Hunnex while giving the incredibly terrible puns, including things like, "The shift makes the bee." It was so obvious that it made me vomit. In fact, it briefly only did because you don't understand, you don't, buddy? After the commercials ended, it then came back to show Mr. Panda and Shifu doing some training in order to be fully prepared for the incoming rival of Raster Pasta. Shifu and Panda tried their best to train while playing in boxing on Wii Sports. However, because they didn't have motion to Shin Center where they'd be able to play effectively, meanwhile the Furious Five did their best to defeat Raster Pasta, but his rapping was too far strong for any of them to handle. "I can't take it," Mantis cried, while ended up jumping off the bridge. He didn't die, however. He ended up landing into the middle of the party, which was hosted by a huge clan of praying mantises. "Welcome home, son." That's when one of the mantises said the mantis began playing party game until the sun went down in Hushbay Mountains. Meanwhile, Zing and Sam Ramsey were shown having finished their dinner, and they left the cupcake shop in order to find Raster Pasta. And that is when Sam received a phone call from the mouse with a severe nose injury. "Sam, I have tipped off. He is at the Valley of Peace." The mouse explained. Sam replied with, "Oh, by Jove, we're on the way." Suddenly, Sam's dingy little car turned into a motorcycle. "Safety first," Sam proclaimed happily as the two put their helmets on. Magically, he and Zane begin riding towards the Valley of Peace. Returning to the temple, Mr. Panda and Shifu were busy dismaying that to learn the Furious Five had been easily defeated by Raster Pasta, and it was also not right calling them Furious Fives anymore. It was now called the Furious Free, as Mantis decided to live with his fellow praying mantises, which worked out well as they were crushed to death by a local bishop. Meanwhile, Crane had succeeded finally a microscopic sculpture, which he had sold an incredibly powerful man to give Crane tickets to Empire Bay. Crane was more than happy to oblige, so was I. So Shifu gave Mr. Panda the Dragon Scroll, hoping that it would have been given the answers to defeat Raster Pasta. Inside the scroll was a huge rotting fish. "What the hell does this fish mean?" Mr. Panda asked, as it was Tigress, the tiger who answered him. "The fish is for your dim dins. Now tuck in." With that being said, rather out of character of Tigress to sound so dumb. But whatever, buddy. I got better things to do about that, so don't worry about that. So Mr. Panda ate the rotting fish and ended up falling ill. His fur turned green and he was carried back to the Valley of Peace on a stretcher. He arrived home at Noodle's restaurant, not carrying a button for the darkness. Meanwhile, Monkey and Tigress got to work on lighting the lamps and not the rat. Not even they were sick. 2 days went by and Mr. Panda spent the day lying in bed watching YouTube, while Mr. Ping finally forced him to get his butt out of bed and help with the cooking. "Shouldn't you be in this specific class?" Mr. Panda asked one of the customers, who was a dumb bunny who had never seen. "Yes, I'm a rabbit, buddy, so I could say these things." That's when Mr. Tuba Snout ended up sneezing an average sneeze. Somehow Mr. Panda heard the sneeze from screen and yelled, "Don't sneeze! Where are ya, asshole?" He then proceeded to grab Tuba Snout on the screen and then pulled him aside. Now, aside this TV screen and Tuba Snout was beaten up to a pulp by Panda, who eventually she got restrained by Mr. Pain and Tigress. Thankfully, Tuba Snout managed to survive and climbed out of the TV screen. He looked traumatized. Isn't that swell? Well, somehow these incidents inspired Mr. Panda to face off Raster. So he put his running shoes on and incredibly stolen from Sonic and began making his way over to the Hall of Warriors. Back at the Hall of Warriors, Shifu had left Raster in the care of Zing and Sam Bramsby. "This time I will finish ya," Sam yelled at the top of his lungs as he began shooting Raster. However, Raster began to rose over for 1,000 feet tall and began destroying the houses of the Valley of the Peace. "Oh, bugger," Sam said as he and Zen both retreated inside the small escape pod. And the pod that they used to escape pod flee to Mexico, where they got new identities and have their names named Yuan and Got a Lot. Now that's really terrible name for Buddy. Anyways, Mr. Panda then arrived on scene, and upon seeing how huge Raster had become, he turned in to make a break for it. However, he didn't get very far before he was picked up by Raster. "You know, there's something you should know, and I'm going to tell you, so don't sweat and enjoy the show," Raster rapped as he placed the panda onto his shoulder and began making his way down to the streets of China to an enormous skyscraper. Have you ever seen anything bigger, mighty than a skyscraper? I'd kill for a skyscraper like that. So Raster began climbing up the skyscraper while Mr. Panda was placed on his shoulder. Suddenly, a military airplanes appeared on scene and he began firing bullets to Raster, but they had no effect. "They can take them," one of the pilots said, as they were just happened to be fat bloody pig. He even dive bombing into Raster, but the provided fluty that his plane picked up by Raster and then crashed to a billion tiny bite-sized pieces. Meanwhile, Sam and Zing were hiding out in the Hall of Warriors with Shifu and the others. "I have an idea, but it's a long shot, but it's how my plan will work," Sam said as he pulled out a large pack of Chewits from his coat pocket. Then he made his way over to the streets towards Raster. The sky above him turned orange, caused Tigress to yell, "Come back, Sam! Come back!" Sam made his way up to the skyscraper using a ladder, which had been just a case of the Hungarians in the summer of 2012. He then threw a pack of Chewits at the Raster's face. Upon chewing the said Chewits, Raster proclaimed, "Yum!" and then he threw Mr. Panda on the shoulder, who was caught by Furious Free. Raster then began walking towards the sunset, not having to care in the world, until he was eventually captured by the military and taken to Area 69, where then he was experimented for the rest of the days. Should have gone the spectators Raster. With Raster defeated, Sam Bramsby all hailed as a hero and rewarded the little dragon warrior the mighty dragon scroll. Turns out Oogway had been airpointed as Bramsbury as the dragon warrior, but due to the mistake of printing up accidentally selecting Panda instead, Mr. Panda didn't even get replaced and got a job as a janitor looking at the local gym, which had been ran by a tiger who is incredibly calm and loves Star Wars. I think I'm not really sure what to be honest with you, buddy, but upon receiving this mighty dragon scroll, Bramsby opened it up in dismay that the rotten fish had already been eaten by the panda. "Oh, buggering Buggerton," Shifu cried as Sam began going on a killing spree and then killing everyone in the Valley of Peace with Zing's help. Though the papers would begin to drift due to Zing paying them off for not mentioning the involvement, Mr. Payne's face then lit up when the whole screen said, "There is no secret ingredient," and with that said, it ended with the normal credits. There was a small post-credit which it featured Jack Black making chicken curry. "Ooh," Jack Black saying as he began making his curry. And that's when he was also wearing a big old chef hat, which reached the ceiling that big. With that being said, the DVD player blew up, and suddenly the monk who had been using the bathroom as a result of laxatives from earlier came out and began running towards me like a madman. He grabbed me by the neck and lifted me in the air and yelled, "I thought you were my friend, Bernie," Monk yelled at the top of his lungs. "Mate, I don't know who you are," I said, as I caused the monk to have the scariest face that I have ever seen. "You think I'm joking around? Believe me, buddy, I wish I was." "Well, that was complete waste of time," Tuba Snout muttered as he sneezed into the blankets. I had spent a very long day trying to get those damn blankets. No, actually, I had stole them from the local church because I'm quite a mischief of a rabbit. I guess I don't really practice as what I preach, do I, buddy? Well, you don't know what I preach because I haven't met you yet. Anyways, Tesco then turned to face Dave Hedgehog and said, So, you've been seeing any chimps? What? I asked, and all of a sudden Don Futchie then came in, busting down the door, demanding to know where the money was. Such a disrespectful, you watch a film and you didn't even invite me? You know I have 3 daughters, you know? Futchie then spat on Monk's shoes and then looked on his toast. Whatever it gets for the weekend, I suppose. So, while Dave struggled to speak, while I bust myself, pouring him a glass of icy purple wine. It wasn't exactly wine, it was black currant due to the reascension, but which came to the result of the station and the world I was facing. I then reached inside my rabbit ears. I pulled out around $200 and placed it onto the table. Ah, you're a fine young rabbit. How come you haven't noticed? I have not noticed you yet. Maybe that's because you're a tool, I responded with, and yet somehow the mayor didn't seem to be too noticed as he said, if you need to work, come with me at my house. Then he put on his white fedora and made his way out to the streets of Walnut Pass. So I began moving Futchie back into his house. Tuba, Snout, and Monk were accompanying me. They fully know I was planning to kill the mayor. He obviously didn't have anyone backing him, and we barged our way inside Futchie's house and made our way to the restraint at the revolving door, which had somehow stalled into his house. Monk then pulled out a revolver and popped 6 bullets into Futchie's while $1 suit, killing him instantly. With Futchie now dead, we made our way back to the town hall and broke through the good news to Dave the Hedgehog, and Spudgun, who had both looked horrified, did Tesco. He did have powerful friends and mysterious people. I told you to be calm, Dave cried as I suggested. May I suggest the teachings of Jedi? I may suggest the footing of your ass, but Tuba Snoot said as he gave me a good kick near my ass. And he kicked me so hard that the foot ended up coming out of my mouth. That's just another story entirely. With Futchie and with no more, Dave the Hedgehog and Spudgun came to the new paradise of Walnut Pass and became a good friend of Evan McAllister and mayor of Charter City. The killing of Futchie then just earned the Hedgehog of a great deal of respect, and he played no part nor for Spudgun. And for the more people that began attending the martial law lessons, and Dave began hosting a movie night every Saturday night, sometimes Thursdays whenever he feels like particular happy hedgehog. Sadly, Futchie's death did not have any consequences. It turns out Futchie did not have any connections to the big boss, although I can't claim what seems to be his face, but he punished me and Tuba Snout for forcing him to do work such as small bag money located in Riker Fields, which he ran over stupidly Butterfly General, who gave out the promotions willy-nilly. However, Tuba Snout and I were never able to earn one since the general role was really rude towards rabbits and moles for some reason. Meanwhile, Monk was very treated and very upset and respected by the Coralines upon learning them from the mayor's murder in May and having to be one of the actually pull triggers. So Monk ended up making his friends and family from Lost Haven. But will not be bad guys, let him do it. I don't know, I probably guess I got Tesco married to a woman that he has no nose and eats cigarettes for a living. It's real love. It's real love. Moving on. Dave the Hedgehog and Spudgun had never bothered to reach out for me and Tuba Snout, and essentially cut off their ties with us. So disrespectful. Working in the army is a pain in the ass for Tuba Snout, but I had to work such long hours. The general and his lover Bootleg Splinter forced us to do all the work, and we had no say in any of our plans. We were forced to even carry the army supplies to San Francisco and all the way to Eckno. Oh, why are we moving blankets, Bernie? Tuba Snout asked as I yelled, I don't know, you greedy dirtbag. Tuba Snout and I have been conspiring with the rival of General to kill our Sen's leader and take over. He's looking for a traitor, and we may be on his bet. So that Kung Fu Panda bootleg thing, whatever you want to call it, has taught me a valuable life lesson. It taught me that there were no secret ingredients. Maybe if we just paid Futchie the full $700, fine, maybe the whole thing could be avoided. But at last, it was not meant to be. And that, my little pretties, was Kung Fu Panda bootleg version. A Kung Fu Panda funny pasta written by Matthew Bumford. Matthew Bumford, I want to say right now, I want to thank you so much for this story. Thank you so much for the story. This was really appreciated. And I definitely have to say, this story was actually really good. Now, I am going to say right now, since this one was almost a half an hour long, so I'm going to go ahead and make the review as short as I possibly can. I do actually find this story to be rather good, especially with the good grammar, sentence structuring, storyline, and everything like that. Everything that has been described in Kung Fu Panda in the, well, creepypasta itself in the story, it actually is very believable. Even though, yes, I haven't seen the Kung Fu Panda movies in a long time. I think for some reason I like the first one. The second one actually did pretty good too, but I think I prefer the first one. But I could definitely say that this story was actually really amazing in regards to the fact that the grammar was really good and the fact that the sentence structuring actually played out well. The whole story of this was actually very believable in a sense. It actually made a whole lot of sense on why this is actually believable and why this is actually the case. It's actually pretty interesting, taken by the fact that the story actually worked out really well. I could definitely say that now, that the story was actually believable of what happened. It was funny too, I definitely have to say. There was a lot of parts in this story that was really, 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 really funny. Like, there was a lot of parts in this story that was really funny. And it was actually one of those stories I really remembered laughing at. Now, I did have to take multiple takes because I ended up laughing so hard because it was very silly and really funny of how the characters, behaved, and oh my god. This story was one of the good ones of Kung Fu Panda. I believe I did see another one, but I think that was just cliched because someone else wrote it. But anyways, getting back with the review. The story was actually very believable, and it's pretty silly of how the characters, reacted the way they did. It was awesome, Matthew Bumford. You do know how to make a really good funny pasta. You sure know how to make a really good one. So I highly recommend you make more of these, as the more funny pastas you make, the merrier. But I could definitely say you did a really good job with this story. So, I guess I kind of, can wrap up this review, because yet again, I'm trying not to make them really long as when it comes to, doing these reviews. But I'm going to say right now, I like this story. I really love it. It was amazing. I do appreciate the grammar being good, along with the sentence structuring, the paragraph structuring. Everything described and detailed in it is very believable and silly too, because I ended up laughing at certain parts. That's why I had to take multiple takes, so I had to practice because I couldn't even go through the whole story on the first try without sitting there and bursting out laughing. Oh my goodness. It was really good. I definitely have to say, Matthew Bumford. So I'm going to say right now, and like I'll always continue to say, my pretties, this is simply my own personal opinion. And if you disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these curry pastas, or funny pastas in this case. And this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. It's just really that good. And I love how Matthew Bumford writes these stories. It's just amazing. Really well done. Really well made, and I definitely have to say that the story actually had a lot of believability in it, and it was funny too, and I could definitely say, Matthew Bumford, you know how to make a really good troll pasta. So, with that being said, my little pretties, what did you all think about this funny pasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what would you have done person to help make this story a lot better? Leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comments section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so that you guys will not miss an upload. So as always, please roll the outro because I'm out of here. And I will be catching you all in the next video. Peace out, and I'll see you all later.